Okay, here we are. Welcome to the stream, everyone. After a little bit of technological hassle, we are finally on the stream. Uh,
I don't think it's actually live.
oh
wait,
wait,
there we go.
it's
Got it.
it's live now.
Wait,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Now, I am here with several wonderful guests today to debunk Illuminati's misinformation because Illuminati drama has resurfaced once again, and it's yet again time for more debunking and just exposing of how fraudulent her content is, and just straight up wrong in some cases, like the particular video that angered many, her very, very bad video where she tried to claim that zoos were wrong. I'm gonna try and remain respectful, but since she's kind of an awful person, yeah.
And as a quick disclaimer, despite what the title says, it is one of this video we are talking about is one of the worst videos we've done or she's done, but it still does not pale in the video that caused her downfall.
True. Now,
just keep that in mind.
Okay, now I have a few zoology nerd friends to help me in this task, and hopefully we'll be able to make some fun out of debunking this content, just so that anybody who does think that what she said on this particular topic is right will kind of end up learning, no, there's a lot wrong with this particular video. So, without further ado, you guys all introduce yourselves, and then I'll start the video.
Alrighty. Triceratops just mentioned he'll join in a minute.
Okay, okay, everyone. Sorry, Triceratops is gonna be a little bit late. Everyone, please introduce yourselves. You guys are all, I believe, almost all of you guys do have a YouTube channel yourselves. I'll link that in the description. Just introduce yourself, and we'll be able to get going.
Someone else go first. I am not going first.
Alrighty. My YouTube channel is Bren's Wild World. It is currently a dead channel that might change here in the future. Spent most of my life, learning about animals, both, living and extinct. I used to do wildlife rehabilitation for a while, which means I have some idea of how certain things go, especially in the zoo world as well. You can go ahead next to the next person.
I'm Simon. You can find me on YouTube at Simon J. I mostly post videos about my various zoo trips and other encounters with animals. Follow me on Instagram at Janovic Photography. That's S Janovic on Twitter.
He has some fire animal related
And
content.
I am Pastor Montanus. I am just generally interested in the natural world, including its flora and fauna, and I want to preserve the billions of years of collective phylogenetic diversity.
Thank you. Yeah, he probably knows the most about animals out of all of us here. Anyways, Damien, it is your turn now.
Oh, hooray. So fun. I don't have a YouTube, so I've got nothing to plug. So, hi, I'm Damien Waters. I am also a zoology nerd, but I also am a student of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. I keep an eye on a handful of accreditation whatnots. I spend most of my time debunking calling misinformation is a stretch. It's more or less just sometimes just people are misled. A lot of the times, a lot of older people, example, don't even they haven't been to a zoo in so long that how do I put it? They don't even know what it's so much more intricate than just bad or good, which is why when I was invited, I was like, oh, that'll be cool, because it's the dark side of zoos it's much more complicated than, again, it's not all bad or all good. There's gray area, and you have to, instead of just of a blanket boycott or abolition, you need to just talk to people. But yeah, if you want, you can find me on Twitter or I suppose it's still Twitter. I don't know if it's not Twitter anymore.
It's X now, I guess.
Yeah, it's X. That Zoo Kid, it's capital T, capital Z,
And
capital
on
K.
TikTok.
Yeah, I don't use. I have a handful of social medias on the link tree, but truth be told, I never use them.
Just look
If you
down.
want,
Oh, continue.
I would go through Twitter if you want to contact me or learn more about the zoological field or the accreditation field. That might be more of a way to contact me. I know a good a bit. I feel like my introduction's way longer than everybody else's.
No, it's fine.
Like
It's fine.
crap.
It's fine.
Well, long story short, I know my animal expertise lies mainly in ungulates and a handful of other small branches of animals. I like Panthera is not my area of expertise, so if she goes into parts of like big cats and like
handle
servals
that.
and bobcats, that's I'm in the dark.
And
Yeah,
I,
I believe
I
she
know a
gets
decent
into.
amount, but-
I believe she gets into bears and elephants mostly.
that actually, so that's good too that you were good at ungulates. I'm more in birds and reptiles, amphibians, fish.
That's good. Okay,
invertebrates,
I'm a
that thing,
carnivore
so-
person, so I'll be able to debunk most of that. Damien, you would know a
I
bit
know-
about elephants, though, probably around the hoofstock area.
I know a bit about elephants too, regarding captive elephants too. So that'll be, I'll send my 2 cents from
Does
my
she talk
understanding
about
on
birds
how
of
can
prey?
elephants
I
work.
haven't watched this video in like 4 months.
She's talked about a wide variety of things.
Yeah, she doesn't really specify. Also, I hate the recommended after this. I'm gonna have to delete this from my search history.
It's
It's
a
gonna
lot.
have to.
God,
It's clickbaity because it's very easy to find like an animal behind like a metal cage and just be like, well, they're all like this. Well, it's like,
And
yeah,
I'm sure a lot of them. I'm
zoos
sure a
haven't
good
been
portion
like
of them
that
are, but they're not
yeah,
all like
for
this.
When
for
you
like
mentioned
100
when you
years.
men-
Also, why are
When
human
you-
zoos pulling up in my recommended and this AI generated image?
when you're
But yeah, okay.
Damien, when you mentioned older generations, that's
Yeah.
how they view zoos. They view zoos how they remembered them as kids,
Yeah.
And I mean, they were a lot
Absolutely.
different than.
which is different than how it is now.
At least in the first world countries, because in my country they don't really have zoos for conservation.
Yeah, that is kind of a thing. Yeah,
That is true,
This
though.
will be focusing. This will be focusing on mostly on European and American zoos, though.
Now, like, yeah, that's
from
the
my
thing that I've
understanding.
learned. Like, I remember when I was talking to somebody about zoos on Twitter, and they cited some zoo in Mongolia, like, that was abusing their elephants. It's like, unfortunately, I'm just going to say this, zoos across a lot of areas of Asia haven't really reached the area, or like zoos in America and Europe were kind of in the 1800s or so. And then
Well, even into the
some
Really
of them
third
are
world
some of
countries
them
in
are
general.
yeah, some of them
Yeah.
are beginning to kind of reach what we know now as modern zoos, but even zoos like in Tokyo and Beijing still don't really have the standards kept elsewhere, and I'm excited because it does seem like they're shifting towards a trend of more conservation focused zoos as a lot of species there start dying out. And I personally would
remember-
really like to go to a lot of those zoos. I know Beijing in particular with the snub-nosed monkeys and the pandas has done a great job with conserving their native fauna, and yeah.
I mean, to
Continue. Sorry, I
guess
keep
to be-
interrupting.
I guess to be fair, giant pandas in China are kind of like how bald eagles are here in the U.S.
Yeah, America.
It's more of a we can't let an animal that's a symbol of our country die at our hands, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
heard stories through the
unfortunately,
years of
yeah. Like,
I
we
was
And
gonna
at
can't.
the same time, what they do is by promoting the giant panda, they're risking the other species by ignoring their conservation, by totally pretending they don't exist. You know,
Yeah,
That's
I
part of
mean,
the
you're
issue.
right there. They put in a lot of effort to the Chinese panda breeding, but like if you ask the average person off of the street to name an animal from the Chinese ecosystem, they'll almost always say pandas. I mean, I do feel like it's a really important ecosystem, and I'd like to see it getting more conservation because, like, the Ganges River, or not the Ganges, the
Oh,
Yangtze is
Yangtze.
losing a ton of
Yangtze.
fauna, and nobody's doing anything about it.
I mean, I mean, I will say that I'm glad that my lucky that my local zoo, the Phoenix Zoo, has a really not as well known Chinese icon, which is the Chinese alligator.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah,
So we have a rather, I mean, it's a large bull, which, I mean, large is relative with Chinese alligators. They're less than 6 feet long most of the time, so they're not a very large alligator species.
Yeah, and what doesn't help is a lot of the zoos in that area are kind of gatekeeping certain animals. Like, we can't get in other areas around the world snub-nosed monkeys and giant pandas very easily. So it's kind of difficult to promote a lot of the conservation and get like other breeding programs for them because they've kind of been locked into that specific area. But I know Ethiopia is doing that too with the Ethiopian wolves now limiting exports on animals.
Too.
And what we can't. I thought there are still geladas in a lot of zoos outside of it.
There are geladas in captivity, but it's hard to bring in new genetics for that.
The Galapagos is starting to do that too, but I can see their reason why because of the reptile trade.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, well, we'll definitely talk a little bit about that in this video.
But yeah, it would be nice to see a lot of those countries open up to adding more animals in. But anyways, all that to say, I should probably get this started playing now so I can hear you guys' reactions. So we can all start debunking it, because I know a lot of people have been... Yes. So, because I know a lot of you guys have kind of been waiting for me to dig into the video, and you all too. Triceratops will be here in a moment. So, let's go.
All right, let's
do the time warp, but maybe in a cooler way. Many of you remembered my Illuminaughtii plush, the one with the magnifying glass, and then more recently the Illuminaughtii plush with...
Okay, she's just going to go through a lot of this stuff here.
Oh yeah.
She's lost so many sponsors due to her actions.
I know.
Hilarious.
Sorry, I don't... Okay, here. Let's go now.
For Illuminaughtii, or just click the link in the description box. Who here remembers their very first field trip to a zoo? Show of hands?
Literally everyone here.
I can't actually see your hands, but I'll trust that plenty of you are raising them right now.
Okay, I know I don't mean to start right off the bat going.
Bro, we just got here.
I know.
We didn't even get a chance.
I gotta say, this brings back something I was gonna say. My interest in animals was started by going to the zoo. Like, as a small child, I went to the zoo constantly, and that's where I've gained almost all of my knowledge. That's what started it up. And I think it's kind of, I'm sure it's the same for all of you guys here, kind of goes to show how much of an impact they really can have on people's interest. But anyways, let's keep going, because I was just going to say, shout out to the fact that they inspired me to become a zoologist.
So actually, I do have something very quick to add to this. So my love of animals started actually with Steve Irwin, and then it became fostered by my uncle, who was at the time a volunteer with the Minnesota Zoo.
Nice.
So zoos did play a huge role in where I am today.
Yeah, because a small child nowadays is likely not going to be able to go out onto the African plains and see a lion or a leopard. Zoos are really probably the best way of educating the general public about animals and getting people interested in their conservation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, nature programs can do that, but as David Attenborough said, and a lot of vegans attacked him for this, there really isn't anything like seeing... you can watch a program or something, but there really isn't anything as inspirational as seeing a tiger or an elephant in the flesh.
And as somebody who has helped people overcome their fear of snakes and stuff like that, I can attest that is correct.
Yeah. So. Wisdom. Very wise indeed. All right. Let's keep going.
Even if it's just in your mind. Chances are when you were a little kid, and maybe even now, the zoo was a magical place. Some kids have apparently thought elephants were mythological creatures before seeing them up close. While reading about these animals and seeing videos of them can be informative, there's nothing quite like seeing a tiger, a penguin, a lion, or a polar bear up close and personal, as long as you don't get too close. Plus, while we know that animals like these shouldn't be kept in tiny metal cages, zoos have come a long way, right? There are some beautiful ones out there, and some of the animals are kept in acres of space, giving them plenty of room to run around, play, roam, grow, whatever their heart desires, really. But maybe, despite this, you've still questioned their ethics. Is it really okay to keep these animals as a form of entertainment when they belong in the wild? Thankfully, that's not always the case.
Can we pause
Oops,
it real quick?
she just showed a leopard and a jaguar.
I'm so glad you caught that. I was just gonna say, yeah, that was a leopard, and then she just showed a jaguar. That was all I wanted to say. Carry on.
You
Yeah,
can enjoy
yeah.
your zoo visits guilt-free, knowing that modern ones are working to help conservation efforts.
Conservation is one of the cornerstones of their operation.
Research in zoos contribute to a number of scientific fields, including animal behavior and endocrinology.
Here in Texas, our reptile zoologists are working hard to save the beloved Texas horned lizard.
While many of these animals and natural habitats are being wiped out, whether due to hunting,
Okay, so she's gonna say this about how zoos are good, and then she's gonna go at the end of the video and say zoos are bad. She just
she's gonna
circles
write-
around
she's
in a
gonna write
complete
about
circle
us.
and then just changes sides throughout the video to try and make zoos look bad and then come off as
She's gonna.
yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
land
gonna
development
deliver
or
a write-up.
deforestation, zoos are here to step in and lend a helping hand, keeping these animals from becoming completely
like this is actually a really good intro. This is she was on the right track here.
extinct.
Use
This may not help the root cause, though scaling back on land development and contributing to global warming is a totally separate issue. But
Though I will say, I know like Omaha Zoo works with the Animal SOS project in India. The Omaha Zoo is working very well with that. I'm sure you guys are already familiar with that project. Look it up if you haven't. It's really interesting. I am friends with one of the people that works there. So yeah, sorry about the beeps in the background.
I can't hear anything, so like no beeps or anything in the
It's
background.
okay.
meant to
Already
be a way
beats,
to
boss.
keep
You're
these
good.
animals alive and to educate the public. That's the argument that supporters give to critics.
What happened?
Okay, 1 second.
And they're not entirely wrong, not by any means. There are some fantastic zoos out there that do exactly this.
Like, she was
They
actually
genuinely
really
want what's
onto
best for
something.
the animals in their care, and some are famous for their conservation work, even being
Hey, San
managed
Diego.
by the Wildlife Conservation Society itself. On the surface,
That's
this modern
Bronx
zoo
Zoo.
might have a wonderful impact on
Other
future
New York zoos,
generations
not
too,
WCS,
as studies
is
have
not.
shown that, quote,
you
those who
pause that real
reported
quick?
a sense of
Wait,
connection
what?
to the animals
Okay.
at the zoo.
Oh, African wild dogs also. What was it?
So WCS is Wildlife Conservation Society. That is more specific to New York zoos. So like Bronx, Central
And
Park.
Yeah.
the aquarium there too.
Yeah. So Staten Island Zoo, Queens, those zoos.
New York
It's not-
area.
that's not
Yeah, there's a
overall.
handful of them.
WCS.
Yeah.
Yep.
All very good zoos, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, if you, once again, I encourage you to all watch the show The Zoo. It's really good. It's
Oh, yeah.
behind the scenes. Yeah.
Mhm.
I've just
the
started
first season's
watching
about
that
the
with
Bronx.
a few people. But yeah, also African wild dogs. Love them.
Zoo
Look at that.
also
Look at
correlated
that.
positively with general environmental concerns.
that's
and that's
Zoo
amazing.
Boise.
They help
That's their painted
conservation
dog
efforts
exhibit.
and endangered species.
Wait, which exhibit is
Boise,
that? I've
Idaho?
never seen indoor
Yeah,
exhibits
Zoo
for African
Boise
wild
has
dogs.
the Gorangosta region of their zoo. They have an indoor area for their
Which
painted
zoo?
dogs.
Oh, doesn't Boise have striped hyenas?
Oh yeah, they do.
I think
They do,
so,
and
yeah,
they have
they
an
do.
indoor area for them too.
So,
Yeah.
thank you all for coming.
OMG,
Nothing to see
Madagascar.
here.
Just smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Flipping
Except,
hell.
let's read onward a bit to the next line. Quote, on the other hand, the researchers reported there were no significant differences in survey
What? They're literally alright. We'll link the papers in the description. There are literally papers on this. There are literally papers on this. Like, there are literally like 20 papers on this, and they all disagree with what she's going to say here.
responses before entering an exhibit compared to those obtained as visitors were exiting. Okay, so maybe people aren't as inspired to change the world as we thought because they visited a zoo.
But they
Pause that really quick. Yeah, I am. She is. This is very disingenuous. People also She's not taking into a fact that people also process information differently from one another.
Yeah, like, for me, the
sometimes
zoo was the thing that got me interested in wildlife conservation. I know for some people that may not be the case, but the least zoos do is educate them and tell them about how to improve. Like, the least they can do, they do.
Exactly. And also, people don't always come to that, inspiration, after they leave an area.
Yeah.
Like, those aren't immediate. That's not an immediate response to that. Isn't always, going to happen.
Also, the sloths are adorable, but that's not in a zoo.
Disingenuous.
The sloths are adorable.
That's not a zoo. That's
not.
That's the sloth sanctuary in
Yeah,
Costa Rica.
But
I was gonna say, that's what I was thinking. I was gonna say, I couldn't remember if it was Costa Rica or Puerto Rico, and it was bothering me. Thank God you knew. Thank you.
It's Costa. Those are baby Hoffmans too. So sloths.
Yeah, they're
from Central
adorable.
America.
I remember Coyote Peterson went down there once. Anyways, we gotta continue.
Okay, let's continue.
But what about the animals? Are they being rescued? Aren't they being helped? Well, as you've probably guessed, this topic isn't nearly as black and white as it might seem. And while good zoos do exist, many of them may cause far more harm than help.
Okay, and then she's gonna go at the end of the video and say that all of them are bad. Just watch.
Yeah, this is the turn. This is the turn from she had us in the first half. Not gonna lie, this is where it turns.
I also love how they constantly make use of bars as if to make it look like a prison. Like, they don't actually show the animals walking around in their exhibits. They only show them up by the bars. It's so funny in all these videos. It's like all they do.
It's like a Humane Society of the United States ad. You just see it in the arms of an angel playing in the background at this point.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's talk about it. I'm the Illuminaughtii, and this is the corporate casket. But before we jump into it, I just want to remind you that I actually do have a Patreon, in case you were wondering. It's patreon.com/Illuminaughtii. Make sure to head over to patreon.com/Illuminaughtii. Links will be in the description.
There are rumors that Patreon's investigating her behavior, by the way, so her Patreon may be going bye-bye.
No. Oh.
So,
okay, Triceratops is going to be joining in just a moment.
Yeah, and also to the people that are also commenting.
Just
so you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like Dr. Terminator said that, good thing Illum lost all credibility after the editing incident. She went after the editor for Legal.
I know.
They didn't even apologize to the editor. They apologized to Legal Eagle, which of course was going to say, "Oh, that's all right."
God, that was such a complex incident. I mean, no offense, but we don't really have enough time to get into all that here.
Yeah.
Because literally
we're not gonna. I just need to kind of
so
quick aside.
much tea to spill.
Yeah, that is a different subject altogether. That kind of ties into this because she doesn't cite her sources very well, which is in all technicality plagiarism. But we'll get into we won't get into that too much.
We're only 4 minutes through, and it's already been like 20 minutes on the live stream. So
let's go ahead.
Let me start off by saying that if animal abuse is particularly upsetting for you, then you may want to skip this episode in its entirety, because we're going to jump right into this and talk about some of the most common arguments as to why zookeeping can be harmful before we discuss the broken system around it. So first, I want to discuss the obvious, clear forms of abuse around keeping animals like this. While there are zoos out there that truly care about their animals, when basic needs aren't met, these wild animals suffer drastically. Sure, some of us may be homebodies and joke that we'd love to stay at home all day, every day, but what about staying in a closet? What about when you're hardwired to travel in the wild and hunt for prey and you can't do that? Researchers found that, quote, the time devoted to pacing by a species in captivity is best predicted by the daily distances traveled in nature by the wild specimens. In other words...
Okay, no. Where do I start there? Okay, where do... She's going to go on
and
and
just completely destroy... If an animal is meant to travel 10 miles every single night, then they'll pace roughly 10 miles worth of steps in their enclosure. And imagine having to do that in your bedroom. Wouldn't that drive you away?
Okay, sorry, I gotta pause it. Okay, that was just grossly incorrect. I mean, no, animals That's not how that works. That's really not how that works. So pacing in animals can work like that, where they're trying to do it in small areas, but it's usually just done coincidentally in more territorial species, like felids and that, for the reasoning not that they're stressed or whatever, but that they're a territorial animal that spends their whole day going around their territory. And so they have a territory in that zoo. So they go around their territory. That's why they'll do it. Even if you get like a big gated off area of wilderness or whatever, the biggest enclosure possible, they'll still do it. And they'll still do it in the wild. That's why we set up camera traps on territory boundaries.
I was going to say, I mean, I fail to see how this is inherently a bad thing. Like, isn't it kind of predictable that, like, animals that walk more in the wild would walk more in a zoo?
But let me add an extra caveat of a behavior that I've observed, especially in cats. They tend to do this when they know they're getting fed.
Yeah.
They do this around the time because they have schedules too. They go by routines. They know what the routines are. You know, and obviously the keepers change it up a little bit, but they know the basic routines.
Yeah, like
that's
for example, like at the Omaha Zoo, like for example, they do have a schedule. Like for almost the entire day, literally all that the tigers will do is just sit around and sleep. And then around 10 o'clock, they get up and start getting active because the tiger training, feeding is going to be about then.
They'll also pace if there's something outside the enclosure boundary that they're interested in too.
Yeah. I know, but
this is very nuanced behavior.
Like, there is this weird sort of sentiment that big cats in zoos are always pacing, which really isn't the case. Like, at the Omaha Zoo in the current tiger area, I have only seen them pace around feeding times. The rest of the time they just walk around their exhibit normally. Same for the snow leopards. But anyways, let's continue.
A little bit mad. As the New York Times puts it, it's like these wild animals have a Fitbit in their brains. So small cages aren't just harmful because it's not as comfortable. They're harmful because it's absolute mental torture.
Yeah, and see, they show these small cages when the majority of them aren't small cages like this. Now, that mandrill cage is absolutely atrocious. Let me point that out.
Yeah, but like, I'm confused. Why are they showing images of primates when they're talking about big cats?
I don't know. It's because this mandrill is pacing, I think.
It's more to invoke in heartstrings for people. This is very,
the footage.
Very
that's all the
very
footage is. And what really kind of got me with this part is the whole Fitbit analogy. Like, it's a good analogy, but you can't use that as actual fact and be like, yes, these animals have Fitbits in their brains. Their analogies only go so far. That's kind of like, I kind of have to debunk analogies a bit. I'm kind of a bit of, I hate when people use them in arguments, especially like young earth creationists and stuff, because they only go so far. You can't really use them as an argument for why something is inherently bad for you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and like I said, with that internal Fitbit thing in mind, that is when they have the desire to do this. Now with cats, for example, they spend most of their time resting. That's just something cats do. If you have a house cat, you know this. I mean, if they're not hunting and if they're not patrolling territory, they're usually resting.
Also, Triceratops is here, by the way. Welcome,
Excellent.
Triceratops. Glad you're here. We're just debunking some stuff.
Secondly, this mental torment has some clear-cut consequences. Captive animals may self-mutilate, develop tics, pace, display compulsive behaviors, pull out their own hair, you name it.
Yeah, but that's not the majority of accredited zoos.
That's the minority, yes.
Yeah, that's not something that happens there. I have never seen any animal in an accredited zoo pulling out its hair and stuff.
I have also very rarely seen repetitive behaviors. I've seen it with species that
nice.
Might not be getting the mental stimulation that they need, but that's usually rectified fairly quickly.
Yeah.
It's the exception,
Okay, she's
not
gonna
the
bring
norm.
up elephants, so we gotta see this part, because this part,
Oh, boy.
elephants are the most contentious animal with this, and this part's gonna get.
Elephants, for example, are meant to walk 50 miles a day. Even if you give them what seems like a lot of space, so many of them develop joint problems and arthritis or die young.
Okay, I'm just gonna say this. Elephants, she's showing Asian elephants, which don't nearly travel as much as African elephants. And the whole thing with African elephants is like, they don't travel that much a day voluntarily. They do it because they're in the desert and they're looking for
Or
water.
in savannah. Or food.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's not really, what people don't seem to understand is like, Siberian tigers do walk a lot in the wild, but that's because they don't want to starve to death. There is a reason why Bengal tigers don't walk nearly as much. Because there's food all over. They walk a lot because they're looking for stuff. But it's not really voluntary.
Another caveat with the elephant joint problems, that happens to elephants that are kept in areas that are predominantly concrete for long periods of time.
Yeah, which doesn't really apply if you just give them substrate. It's pretty easy.
You can give them
That's why I hate concrete floors in zoo exhibits. I'm glad Omaha just went through Kingdoms of the Night and got rid of all of them and replaced them with substrate. Because they really can have a bad effect on the animal's joints.
Yeah.
So
concrete's easy to clean, but it's at the cost of the long-term health of the animal.
Yeah.
If you're not careful.
While the argument could be made that a zoo can easily...
Oh, continue?
Oh, no, I already said what I meant. What I meant to say.
All right. Also, where is this Dauk Langer? I want to see one so bad.
Give a chimpanzee enough space. We just can't do that for elephants.
She just said chimpanzee over a picture of a Langer.
Oh, God.
Or a Duke. Over a Duke Langer. Jeez.
Okay, let's rerun that there.
Space, so many of them develop joint problems and arthritis or die young in zoos. While the argument could be made that a zoo can easily give a chimpanzee enough space,
she just called it a chimpanzee.
I mean, for God's sake, did you know that hamsters, tiny little fluff balls, can run about 5 miles or more every night in the wild?
Oh, let me.
Yeah, that's why.
Okay, that's actually good. Thank you for saying that, because at least she made an improvement for small animal welfare.
Yeah, for hamsters, that is a good point. They do need space, and they need more space than what commercially available enclosures give for them.
And that's the thing, AZA zoo enclosures aren't like those tiny hamster enclosures. They actually fulfill the requirements.
Yeah.
It's not really a valid comparison to make when you're talking about two totally different things.
Yeah.
You absolutely need a hamster.
Sorry. And I've seen people do massive enclosures with deep space and deep burrows and stuff like that for their hamsters.
That's what AZAs do with animals too. I mean, I'm sure Damien, you would know more about this than I do on zoo enclosure size.
Well, the care guides are public access. That's the issue. The AZA care guides are public access.
Yeah.
Like when Wetlands came out, I shared the one for the small clawed otter to Old Country for his zoo build for Planet Zoo.
Okay, could you, once we're done with this, could you send them to me? Because I'm actually looking for a few of those for orangutans at the moment.
Yeah, I'll see if I can track down.
Okay,
I think I can find the tags. The tags.
Let me go off on a small tangent here, but just for comparison's sake.
They're not valid comparisons,
though. Experts recommend that you have a minimum of a 40-gallon cage, 8 to 10 inches of bedding, and 9 to 12 inches wheel, depending on the breed. And that's just
very true.
But to be fair, 40 inches is what's recommended for dwarf hamsters. Syrian is 60.
Goldens is about the same too as the Syrians.
They're the same thing.
Yeah.
But tiny little hamster happy. And yet there are more and more owners out
Victoria
there
Rachel
doing that
mentioned.
research and willing to turn half their room into a hamster terrarium just to keep their fluffball content. I mentioned on Twitter recently that I actually used to do fish keeping. I used to do only freshwater, and I was thinking about going back into doing fish keeping again, and I've never done a salt aquarium before, so I was trying to do my research into it as well, and I'm still months away from maybe doing any fish keeping whatsoever. But I remember, even with freshwater keeping, there are so many people who do not care about the size of the tank they put their fish in. And I'm not just talking about betta fish, though that is just horrific, and I could talk about the mistreatment of betta fish for literally ever and a half.
Yep.
But the point is,
Not
there are
wrong.
people who are interested
Don't
in
keep them
that
in
was
bowls,
fair.
people.
That was fair. I'm gonna give her props for that. I don't want to just
Yeah,
absolutely destroy.
don't-
That was a
And
good
these are with
point.
animals that these are with animals though that she has potentially has experience with.
She doesn't have
That's the
experience with
thing.
elephants, and that's the issue. And she doesn't.
Yeah.
She doesn't. These are difficult things to compare because one is a pet animal, and the
It's-
other. Yeah, they're not really
not
valid
having
comparisons.
not having firsthand experience caring for the animal is one thing, but when you're doing improper research as well, that is a problem.
Yeah, like, or at least just not speaking with someone who does.
Yeah, exactly. A lot
I would
of
have liked
comments on this
if
video.
she's like this. This got 136.7 thousand views. I would have liked it if she at least talked to a few professionals who maybe knew a little bit more
I mean, it's
about
not that
this
much.
instead of just.
It's only 100,000. It's like it's a million or 10 million or anything like that.
Fortunately, yeah, you've got a point there, but yeah, it's still a lot of people, and not
And it
not
only
all-
adds to
most
the
of them-
never-ending dog pile on zoos at the moment that everyone
Yeah,
is just.
That's
After Harambe, it all went downhill. Rest in peace, my boy.
did.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't seen it, but some video popped up on my recommendation about like how Harambe's story shows how awful it is for gorillas in captivity.
Same for me. I saw that too.
That really isn't exactly a good. That was a very, very, very convoluted situation.
Also,
frankly.
the other ones, she's actually going to use it, so I'm not going to spoil that specific one. But you'll see a certain, probably the most contentious animal zoo incident pop up here in the near future. You'll know it when you see it.
Yeah.
Or if you already don't know which one it is.
Yeah.
in fish keeping, animal conservation, just caring for pets in general, that understand that there are certain requirements, not just in the time you dedicate to your pet and cleaning and all of that, but
Okay,
also to
thank you
how
for
their
being
enclosure is set
competent,
up, how they're
Illuminaughtii.
kept, how they're entertained, what kind of exercise they receive.
But
So-
you do see this far too much within even dog owning and stuff.
If owners of pets can do that domestically, why can't zoos? How come zoos, which should
Zoos
be
do
They
better than
literally
most
can.
pet
That's the
I was
whole
gonna say,
objective.
Yeah.
I've seen some terrible pet owners, boss.
literally
mean,
be
we're
the
not
gonna
pinnacle
begin
of
some of the
advocating for
shit you
animal
did.
welfare. Don't do the same amount of research and work into helping.
What was that statement?
ironic.
What is that statement? Where were we?
7 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. 7 minutes.
they receive. So if owners of pets can do that domestically, why can't
Columbus.
zoos?
Why does she keep putting
How
out
come
Columbus?
zoos, which
Because
should
they had that
literally be
issue
the
with
pinnacle of
unaccredited that
advocating for
happened
animal
recently.
welfare,
Got
don't do the same
recredited
amount of
at that
research
time.
and work into helping these animals that may have far
This
greater
video was uploaded
complicated
4 months ago, so that should have been accredited by then. I mean, AZA is doing their next conference at Columbus Zoo, so you know.
Okay, now look at what she
Columbus-
just said.
that's-
Look at what she just said. She just said that zoos and aquariums don't do the same amount of research as pet owners do. What even is that statement? Is the ACA just a joke to you?
That is Dunning-Kruger if there ever was Dunning-Kruger.
What? What even? She hasn't even gotten
Like-
into the video, and she's just like, yeah, they don't. Like, find me some evidence of that.
needs. Well, it's the same argument we've seen repeated
Ick,
Oh, God.
SeaWorld.
endlessly when discussing orcas at SeaWorld. Some animals just aren't meant for captivity. Thankfully, there are some zoos that agree with this, and they've closed down elephant exhibits. But elephants aren't the only ones displaying these stressful behaviors.
Okay, pause this. That's because they weren't able to provide the space that that AZA had required, or the minimum number of elephants required for a matriarchal herd.
And the AZA
That's
is
why they
starting to
stopped
phase
going.
out the majority of elephant herds just to concentrate on several multi-generational herds now.
As well as a few bachelor herds as well.
Yeah, so that's not the
Yeah.
objective here. And what she doesn't seem to understand is that I believe elephants are projected to go extinct in the wild by the 2030s. I mean, do we really want to lose the most iconic animal there is? Is this really what we want to
Can I
do?
interject?
There's also
Yep,
hundreds
go
of
ahead.
species
Okay,
that
yeah,
depend on
go ahead.
elephants. There's hundreds of dung beetles alone that depend on elephant dung. Right, it's a
Indeed.
massive
Alone.
controversy.
I mean, the reason that the Masai Mara and Serengeti are treeless is because of elephants. Like,
Yeah, and what she doesn't seem to understand is that is what she doesn't actually cover in the video, and what a lot of people don't seem to understand, is even if they're not releasing them into the wild, insurance populations are insanely valuable.
Exactly.
I mean, even if they aren't releasing them into the wild, at least we'll have somewhere to start instead of just having the slate blanked. I mean, well, SeaWorld isn't that bad, but that's something else I could get into.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's a whole different argument. That's a lot different. SeaWorld is epic indeed.
Yeah, that's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Can I interject before we continue?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the zoo, it is so much more complicated with elephants than it is, and a lot of the times when you move, sometimes it's better to get rid or send an animal to a different facility than lose your accreditation for the next 4 years. If the only animal holding you from your renewal of your accreditation is what's holding you back, it's much more efficient to just say, look, we can't do this. Let's just pack it up, and we'll think about it in a couple years.
That's what Topeka Zoo has done with their elephants and hippos currently.
That's what Philadelphia Zoo did 17 years ago. It's been a while. I was little when they moved them. They moved them to Pittsburgh for the breeding program, and they understood, like, look, we don't have the room for this. We understand. And that was what was holding them back. They figured it out, like, if we just get rid of these elephants, we're set.
I mean, and as I said, Topeka Zoo has kind of started doing that too. They're phasing out their elephants because their current elephant habitat isn't adequate, and I'm fine criticizing that. But I'm not saying that elephants shouldn't be kept in captivity just because one elephant habitat is inadequate, like she's saying.
And there are so many people, there are so many circuses and roadside zoos just in the United States alone that just have like Myrtle Beach Safari, like the man who owns that has one lone male African elephant bull, which only knows where he got that from. If it's a loan and it's not part of a breeding program, he must have bought it from another circus. He could have bought it straight from the wild as a calf. God only knows where that thing came from.
I mean, with bull elephants too, it's not as like cut and dry as like with matriarchal herd cows, because bulls do spend a good portion of their time alone, in the wild. So I mean, they do need social interaction. Like they do intermingle with bachelor herds, and of course,
that's a criticism I have heard a lot though, and that's a valid.
I don't even know the last time that elephant that Duck Antle has seen another elephant.
That's the big issue. Yeah, it's not seen another elephant in probably decades.
Yeah,
that's the issue there.
I mean this in the nicest way possible, but what we might want to do is like watch 3 minutes and then stop and say what we have to say, because if we just keep jutting in, jutting out, because I'm on the East Coast, it's almost 12.
How come if you go to a zoo, you don't see that? Well, it might be because the animals are just drugged. And
oh my God.
Okay, we got to get to 10 minutes, but God, we are just gonna go all into that.
You heard me right. Chimps have been given antidepressants to control aggression at the Los Angeles Zoo. A polar bear at Central Park Zoo was given Prozac to stop him from swimming laps, and the Toledo...
Yeah, and the Central Park Zoo hasn't had polar bears for like 20 years.
Yeah,
Zoo has given the zebras and wildebeest antipsychotics to keep them calm. I mean, it just sounds like a horrible nursery rhyme gone wrong, doesn't it? Like, instead of if you give a mouse a cookie, it's if you give a polar bear a Prozac. It's a pretty grim, disturbing picture. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. Not that there are any actual icebergs for these Prozac.
Yeah, okay, we gotta get into this part, because that I don't mean to keep pausing it, but good Lord. What even...
I think we...
Okay, Simon, you know the Toledo Zoo pretty well. Please explain this for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that the thing where they gave the wildebeest and the zebras the antidepressants was just a short-term solution to get them to calm down. Like, it's not like they've been like constantly having high for like 20 years now.
That was likely not a consistent regimen. That was likely just a temporary sedative to get the animals to calm down.
Still, I do like the idea of just high wildebeest running around in the zoo.
when you first get out of a hospital, they give you OxyContin. You don't keep taking OxyContin. Once you're good, you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, is she objecting to veterinary care?
I suppose. And
What's
she talks about
surprising
antidepressants and Prozac. It's not the same that we take. You can't take. They most like, truth be told, the medicine that they gave the wildebeest and zebras was most likely for like horses, because there's no like. It's like, hey, we have like 12 bongos. Do you have bongo medicine? It's like, no, we don't have bongo medicine. That's very specific. So it's easier just to like either like dose it by horse or cattle and go from there.
I used to work at a veterinary pharmacy. They aren't using human medication most of the time.
Okay, so look.
That's the important thing here.
I looked it up, and it says that the Central Park Zoo hasn't even had polar bears since the early 2000s.
Yeah, they phased out polar bears.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just such outdated information. And, I mean, it's been so incredibly long. Like, I don't know why you'd cite something that hasn't happened for so long, but...
Yeah, isn't that story from like the mid-1990s?
Yeah, I thought it said it was from like the... I think it said it was from 1985. I mean...
Wow. Oh, 80s.
So, like, yeah.
Written polar bears to enjoy, but you get my point. I want...
All right. Yeah, that medication bit got me. When I heard it, I'm like, really? Are you really gonna mislead people on how veterinary care works with zoo animals?
Again,
really?
It's one of those things where it's so much more complicated than what meets the eye, and it's just kind of like how it's hard to explain because again, it is so much. It's hard because I run a Twitter account for it, and you only have like how many characters to like get it out. So it's just like half of my tweet is just like, I'm gonna squeeze in the premise of it's way too complicated.
Also,
to just
King of Jays said that one of the smartest students at his high school now believes this video and went around saying that they gave the animals on drugs.
Really?
No, they're not giving. That's a very nuanced situation too. Like again, when they're like giving like those sorts of calming medications to large ungulates, my assumption is that they're doing it for calming the animals so they don't accidentally kill themselves by running themselves into a fence.
Well, yeah, and that's the issue for me.
It's just temporary.
Yeah.
And that's the issue for me. Like, is she objecting to veterinary care? Because if that's the only option that needs to be used, then I mean, what else are you supposed to do? I mean, like,
it's going to be
Illuminaughtii?
It's a better.
Please
it's a
give
better
us
bad situation here.
Please give us a. Please give us a alternative to giving the animals health care. Anyways, let's continue.
Yeah.
Not to stress that there are ecotariums that house injured animals who simply couldn't survive in the wild and tried to give them as good a life as they possibly can. And without these facilities that strive to educate the public, yes, some of these animals would die, starve, or be otherwise unable to thrive in their natural habitat. Take, for example, a great horned owl with head trauma or a golden eagle that's unable to fly. But when you're taking in gorillas, elephants, lions, tigers, bears, oh my, these zoos don't seem to be giving them the best habitat possible.
Which zoos are you talking about, Illuminaughtii? Which ones?
Are you talking about the Greater Wynwood Zoo in Oklahoma that was shut down? You know, the Tiger King Zoo. Is that what you're talking about here? At 20 tigers per enclosure?
I don't get what she's saying. Like, she doesn't know the requirements for the best habitat possible because AZA zoos are already doing that. I mean, that's what the AZA guidelines are for. We already have those guidelines to make sure that zoo habitats are good for the animals and to make it a non-issue. So.
The AZA and EAZA tags for how enclosures work with these animals is public access. Hell, there's websites dedicated to this stuff.
Just go on to Zoo Chat, for God's sakes. Or what is it?
Zoolac.
Tier something. What was it? Zoo tier listing.
It's a zoo tier listed, I think, is just the number of animals in a zoo's and EAZA institutions.
True, but that can also help out a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's continue. I've been pausing it too much.
It's just a poor substitution for what they truly need. And this is why so many people argue that zoos are inherently abusive, that the concept
Including the
alone
people that
can't
you
work
criticize,
except in
Illuminati.
very rare cases. And honestly, I can see the point. It's not all that hard to see why someone would feel this way. But what about the aspects of zookeeping beyond the enclosures? How are these animals actually treated?
Well. Oh, Lord. She's gonna go into the Columbus Zoo. 1 second. Damien, also, I think you know a bit about this one.
In 2019, National Geographic published an article that revealed how hundreds of zoos had been accused of mistreating the animals in their care. Some were supposedly gold standard zoos too, or ones that you would assume would know better. All of this was documented
National
in a report
Geographic
from
has
WAP.
fallen from
No, not
grace
that
so
WAP,
far.
Yeah.
but the World Animal Protection.
Yeah, that's World Animal Protection. That's the
Oh
famous...
yeah, these guys. Yeah, these
That's
guys
the
aren't really
famous
known
Twitter
for
vegan
looking
group.
at the bigger picture. Yeah.
Why
no
are you
comment on this
citing
one.
a group that's known, like, I believe it was either them or In Defense of Animals, that just straight up blocked me for counteracting the misinformation in the comment section.
Oh yeah, I did the same thing. Yeah,
Like,
it happens.
they
talk
don't
about
want...
Thor.
They want their information to go out there, but they don't want anyone to correct them. Because they just want their side to prevent... Their views to kind of go unchallenged, and then
They're
they
virtue
just get rid of
signalers.
anyone
They
who
want to
questions
appear
it.
to be morally superior. That's what they are.
That's
Yeah.
all that is, Pastor. That is all that is. At the end of the day, that's all that is. You're dead on.
Yeah.
Some of the things detailed in their report were things that would cause the animals stress, like visitors being permitted to stroke and cuddle large cats, surf on the backs
yeah,
of
that's-
Zoos don't do this.
That's
ACA
not
don't
even
do
in the
that.
Doesn't say
ACA.
that's just
That's
a-
not even in the ACA. That's not even in the ACA. Don't say that the ACA is bad because zoos that
Roadside
aren't in the
does-
ACA
Roadside
abuse
doesn't.
them. What's she even trying to say
The
there?
only-
I mean,
Like if it's like stingray touch pools or like kitty petting zoos for domesticated species, that's one thing.
but it says
But-
cuddling large cats. That's
That's
not
not
something
going
you do
on in
there.
ACA zoos. Are you kidding me?
And riding on the
Imagine
backs
that
of
spectacle.
dolphins. I mean, come on, do one bit of research, please.
Yo,
of
what
dolphins
year do
and
they
watch
think it
elephants
is?
paint.
4 months ago.
They think it's still like the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
with their trunks.
Okay, but how is that a bad thing? I mean, that's enrichment for the animals.
That's an enrichment thing. Yeah. That,
It's not like they're like
About
forcing the
43%.
elephants to, like,
Yeah,
labor
just
over
holding a gun to
cannabis.
their head and being like, yes, you will paint this for the public.
I've had multiple instances where I've done enrichment training for animals, and they've just like I've set it all up, and I'm like, here you go, and they just get up and leave, and I'm like, oh, that's it. Like, I like the idea where they're like, they're forced to do it. It's like if they don't want to, they can just get up and leave.
how are
I've
you
had that
gonna
happen
force-
multiple times with mountain lions. I've worked with mountain lions, and I set up an enrichment thing, and they're like, nah, and they just got up and
Well, it's
left.
like, how are you gonna convince a 7-ton elephant, force an 7-ton elephant to do something without using like an Anchus or something?
And I mean,
Right.
if that was going on in front of the public, they would notice. But anyways, we've got 14 minutes left. So
Anyways,
we gotta
Percent of the facilities detailed in their report, almost half allowed petting, and about a third offered walking and swimming.
Well, yes, that's what domestic animals in zoos are for.
Yeah.
And
That's
of
what
course,
education
you can walk through enclosures like kangaroo, except because they get enrichment out of that.
Well, and,
through an
and to be fair,
enclosure.
the guests have strict rules to follow
Yeah.
when it comes to this.
and or
Don't-
wildlife performances.
And
About
is she talking about? I'm trying to get what she's going at here because she's using words that aren't really the same as what they're used by the ATA. Like ambassador animals, is that what she's getting at there by
He's going at
performances?
ambassador animals
Because once
and
again, I
walkthroughs
don't
of-
see why that's a bad thing. That's enrichment.
a fourth, or 23%, had hand.
Yeah, and like that's also enrichment. I don't see what
Feeding
she's going
giraffes
after.
is
I mean,
something-
I don't see how
feeding,
this
like,
is an
sting-
issue.
She's grasping at straws. This is grasping at straws at this point. If straw
And feeding-
as one content creator described Illuminati's behavior, if straws were growing on straws, those are the straws she's grasping on
Yeah.
here. That's exactly what's going on here.
is too. The thing that's important to remember here is that these animals are not domesticated. It's taken thousands upon thousands of years for dogs to become domesticated and enjoy human
There's
interaction.
her dog that she got
Whereas
from
these lions or
Puppy Mill.
elephants aren't just giant dogs, even if Disney movies might make it seem that way. And I swear, every animal cartoon basically ends up like a dog in kids' movies, but that's just not how the world works. Nancy Blaney, Director of Government Affairs for the Animal Welfare Institute, states, quote,
Yeah, that's the animal welfare. She keeps citing these these vegan extremist organizations as if they work, when in other videos she's bashed veganism. It's like, make up your mind. Don't just use this.
Well, it's like, it's also like, yeah, people are aware that these animals aren't, domesticated.
I mean, that's why they don't allow.
There are some people that. It's like not even keepers are allowed unprotected contact with most large predators.
Yeah.
Even some zoos still do it with Komodo dragons, but that's kind of mixed because of kind of how people work with Komodos and other monitor lizards.
And with
the
orcas, they do
the
get a bit
Komodo
of
is kind of.
interaction.
I was gonna say the Komodo bit is whatchamacallit, still kind of like the rules for that are not like quite. It's kind of up in the air still.
Yeah.
I think it's up to each facility to do what they think is best. Because I was gonna say the Bronx Zoo doesn't have contact, but I'm sure you would know better than I, but
Phoenix and Denver do.
Okay, exactly.
I believe Sioux
Phoenix
Falls
and
does.
Denver
I
have
believe
contact.
Sioux Falls does, and San Diego maybe. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Those.
Yeah, they do unprotected contact with their dragons because they've learned how to work with these lizards.
Yeah, I know Australia Zoo
They're
does
still
unprotected
dangerous.
contact
Don't get
with
us
them.
wrong here.
facilities just
They're
kind
still
of bill this
dangerous
as
and
wildlife
kept an eye on,
tourism.
but
And it's really nothing of the sort. Wildlife tourism is the kind of thing where you go and see wildlife in their own environments, not where you go and get to take a picture with the tiger, or you get to interact with a monkey that's dressed up in street
These are
clothes, or
roadside
kissing an
zoos.
orangutan.
I was gonna say, I don't think I've ever. That is not something we ever have and ever will do. But
1 second.
That is annoying because that's not how animal ambassador stuff works.
not at all.
Even walkthrough exhibits for birds and even primates and kangaroos, there are very stringent rules that you got to follow.
Yeah,
I mean,
I have friends
she
that-
just
I have
kind of
friends that
threw
work
the
in those little-
whole AZA guidelines out the window and was like, why should we care about that? That's literally the entire objective of. Alright, but yeah, okay, we gotta keep going with this.
Or
Just
something
keep going
like that.
on this.
That is not wildlife.
1 second, I gotta go again.
Yeah, they're right here that's not wildlife tourism and that's exploitation. That's roadside
absolutely.
facility. Yeah, that is.
When I went to Thailand, they were dressing up chimpanzees and orangutans in human clothing and basically forcing them to take pictures of people.
Yeah,
But that's
I mean-
not a zoo. That's basically a third world country and doing third world things. That's nothing to do with conservation.
Yeah,
That's what
I mean,
roadside
it's
zoos do
really,
here in the U.S.
yeah.
Yeah, it's how it is over here
I'm
across the
petting.
pond, where it's just like.
I mean,
It's
yes,
just-
you
it-
can
it was
find
just a
roadside zoos
menagerie.
that will do it, but you can't. That's not even. That's not allowed in the ACA, so it's not done there. But don't worry, she's gonna have a whole section on why she thinks that the ACA is bad. We'll see.
And the EAZA is bad
Tourism,
as well.
that's exploitation. Wildlife tourism is a whole other dark, disturbing world. Some elephants will spend most of their lives chained up in a stall painting for tourists. Amazonian sloths
that's
taken
in
illegally
Thailand.
from the jungle will often die within weeks, but those that survive
Right.
make for
In an
great
accredited
selfies and
facility,
photo
yes,
shoots.
that does
and
happen.
that's a whole other fucked
that
up world.
takes in-
But it's not really all that
Pretty
different from
sloths because
zoos,
special
just
care.
the flip side of the same coin.
No, it really is quite different. It really is. God, that was the worst comparison I've heard here.
When does
After
the
all,
AZA
these
section
animals
come in?
are
Because
not
that's really where That's
That-
really
it's
my
in,
neck of the
it's
woods.
in 1 minute.
It's about to.
Okay.
Domesticated to be around people, but broken to be tame, to be afraid, to behave. Those are two very different things. But you might be thinking, how are these the better zoos, the gold star ones? Well,
not.
as noted in the report, these zoos were associated with WAZA, the World Association of
They're
Zoos and
very
Aquariums.
loose.
As National Geographic explains, WAZA was founded in 1935, and
They're
they were
very
meant to
loose
promote the message of
standards.
modern zoos,
A lot of
conservation and
non-union
animal
citizens under
welfare.
WAZA, or WAZA.
I've never heard anybody call it WAZA.
He
Yeah.
doesn't know how to do acronyms.
I was just like, I've been to enough conferences and seminars. I've never heard WAZA.
Well, I mean, that's just such a weird thing to say. I mean, it's not WASA. It's the WACA.
Because
call
nothing
AZA
says for the
WAZA.
good of animals like riding
She
on
does.
dolphins, I guess.
Oh,
Now,
does she?
there is an important distinction to make here. WAZA doesn't require accreditation and basically just tells zoos to pay a fee,
What?
I'm not sure on
Damien,
that
please
one.
correct me on this. WAZA is different than the AZA and the EAZA, but I'm pretty sure it requires accreditation.
They do have, I think, accreditation. I think it's a lot less stringent than what the AZA and EAZA
Yeah,
require.
AZA's is really
police themselves,
strict.
and find accreditation elsewhere. I know I threw quite a few acronyms at you, so just to
You didn't even
reiterate,
say them
WAP
right.
is a
You're
nonprofit
one.
that has exposed bad behaviors from zoos associated with WAZA,
Yeah.
One's
And
a-
that's World Animal Protection Society. It's not a valid source.
It's a very biased source.
member
Yeah.
organization that supposedly
The only worst source you could get would be PETA.
Yeah.
promotes the humane treatment of animals. AZA, which is the same thing as WAZA without the
you
W,
go.
does require
They're
accreditation.
literally
No,
not
it's
the
not
same
quite
thing.
the same thing, but
She just said the same thing. They're literally
Is there
not.
So there has been a lot of finger pointing among these organizations, with WAZA saying that WAP isn't actually reputable. Even if that's the
Because they're
And
right.
they're correct.
It's not.
yeah,
I mean,
because
case,
they're
mean,
wrong
I've
about a
heard
lot of
none of
stuff.
them.
WAZA is
stories
supposed to be this beacon of animal welfare, and hearing that the vast majority of their zoos promote potentially dangerous human-animal interaction is pretty damn concerning.
That's
I
not
don't
true,
think they
though.
do, though.
But okay,
You're describing
maybe
that
WAZA
every
has its
tiger
issues,
zoo
but
and Doc
WAZA
Campbell
must be
zoos are
amazing,
doing
right?
they're not.
After all, they require accreditation, so surely at least someone is looking after these zoos and ensuring animals are treated well. No, that's not.
But it literally is. I mean, it literally is. That's how the AZA works. You get kicked out for not treating the animals right.
You'll
Yeah.
get,
What's happening?
as Columbus learned, you'll get kicked out for money laundering issues.
you
Yeah,
get kicked
you
out.
get-
Just, yeah, and even if you
The
get rid of the
AZA's
people,
requirements are insanely strict. What is she talking about?
Yep.
At all. In fact,
Even if you-
things are actually about to get a lot darker.
Ooh. Why
Oh,
Columbus
boy.
again? Does she just hate them?
No,
did-
just up
he-
front and
he did
center,
this
fuck
as
the
a way to
ASA.
get
They're
views and
massive,
money
hypocritical.
and
Whoa,
Feed her
whoa.
ego.
She
That's why
just,
she did it.
she just. Let's listen to that again.
No, just up front and center, fuck the ASA. They're massive,
The ASA.
we should keep
hypocritical
going.
piles of shit. That's my initial thought after researching them for about 2 seconds, and I stand by that
Yeah, and
statement.
she didn't research them anymore.
that's the problem. You research for 2 seconds.
The PETA's
Unbiased
website, I'm
sources.
sure.
Yeah.
And now when I've conclusively found what I needed to find. First and foremost, they claim to have all of these types of reintroduction programs. On their website, you can easily find
I know
information
some
about
about
how,
those, too.
thanks to the amazing and wonderful ASA, black-footed ferrets thrived and were reintroduced into their historic range after their numbers had begun dwindling. Or you might learn that in the 1960s, the red wolf population plummeted due to intensive predator control programs and loss of habitat. But never
A lot
fear,
of people
the
commented
ASA
on
is
that in her comment threads. The Red Wolves. in
Okay,
particular.
could you. Yeah.
here, and they founded a successful breeding program to keep these red wolves from dying out completely. Though strangely, if you dig a little bit deeper, you may learn that the red wolf population hasn't exactly changed much. Sure,
Because
they're
people
carefully
keep shooting
bred,
them.
but
Okay. Where do we start? Anyone want to go first?
Oh, I'll start because she mentioned black-footed ferrets, and Phoenix Zoo is one of the facilities that breeds them off exhibit for reintroduction here in Arizona. They're doing reasonably well. There are some issues, but there are issues surrounding
prairie dogs getting things like bubonic plague, and also getting poisoned by ranchers. That still happens.
Yeah.
We're currently in the process of reintroducing black-tailed prairie dogs into southern Arizona. We were the only state in the lower 48 to manage to wipe them out. But the current populations of black-footed ferrets in the U.S. or in Arizona are feeding on Gunnison's prairie dogs, which are a different species. They're doing fine.
Continue.
But red wolves, the issue is they keep on getting shot.
Yeah, and that's
why
the
their numbers
thing.
are
They
low.
can't just dump all of the red wolves in the AZA into the wild because there isn't enough protection for them to do that. So
Same issue
she's
with
just
gray
saying,
wolf.
hey, AZA, why haven't you gotten all your animals killed yet?
Essentially, that's what she's saying.
And I
The
mean,
same thing goes
that's
with,
just such a shallow thing to say, like, well, they haven't, the numbers haven't changed much yet because it's not safe for them out there.
A lot of people commented on that, saying you should have spoken to people, to wildlife biologists.
And I mean, it has changed, though. It actually has. But what's even worse is that she just said, no, it hasn't changed much, but never fear, the AZA is here, whatever, and then said, well, they haven't changed much, so their population, the AZA must not be doing anything. Like, no, I assure you they are. I really do. I really do. She's never visited an accredited zoo and understood how that works.
She's never talked to keepers.
Yeah, or
That's my biggest issue. She's never
wildlife
talked-
biologists in the field.
They haven't reintroduced
Exactly.
them. When will that day come? Who actually knows?
When will that day
have been
come?
being
Once there's
reintroduced.
legislation that protects them.
If
Well,
you
and they
save
have
something
been
from
actively been reintroduced. Like,
Yeah, North
there's a
Carolina's been
cross-hospital-
taking the reins on that one.
Yeah.
Carolina's
and
zoo's
then
been
here in
pulling up the
Arizona-
reins on that one.
Yeah, and here in Arizona, we've been doing cross fostering wild
Heck-
pups with zoo pups to maintain genetic
Heck-
diversity.
Oh god, I'm spacing out. Great Plains Zoo just had an entire litter of red wolf pups. I mean, yeah. I
lot of
believe they're
zoos have
planning
had
on
a
moving
lot
them
of
out
red
into the
wolf
wild
pups
at
as
one
well.
point. But the issue is that we don't have the legislation in place to protect them once we release them into the wild. So we can't just release all of these valuable animals into the wild and then just claim that I don't know.
And then have
yes,
people shooting them, thinking
this
they're
is a
coyotes.
real video by Illuminaughtii that we're reacting to and debunking because she doesn't really know much. So, yeah, she's basically just claiming that zoos should just, if they're really so good for conservation, they should just release all the animals when there isn't legislation in place that protects them. So, yeah.
Extinction. Is it really all that impressive when you don't actually release them and put them back into nature? I don't.
Well, that's like saying, is it really that impressive when you don't get them killed? Like, yeah, it is.
know. But anyway, back to the AZA website. Similar
AZA.
stories about their reintroduction program.
Everyone's AZA.
Take if you're old enough to drink, take a shot every time she says "aza" and "eaza." He says that too.
AZA. I love it.
The "eaza." Oh, I don't want.
Programs
to
can be
remember.
found about the Karner blue butterfly, the Oregon spotted frog, the Wyoming toad, and the California condors. Yes, the AZA is
Condors have been
amazing.
actively
All
being
right,
reintroduced.
except for one little detail their website
That's
doesn't
interesting.
mention. For all the animals they save, they also kill thousands more in Europe. The European branch, the
There are two different
What?
entities.
What?
Say
What
they're
did she just say?
associated.
Like, what? What even was that statement?
EAZA or the EAZA. I'm not sure.
EAZA.
The unit
EAZA.
has animals in their zoos because of surplus. They claim that it's not more than 200 per year.
Okay,
but
you guys know what's coming up here. You all know
Yeah,
what's
well, I
coming
know
up
what's
here.
coming up here.
You all know what they're gonna say. Just take a shot
Right.
every time that someone brings this up in a video.
Yep.
But the EAZA director has estimated that number between 3,000 to 5,000.
Hey, right, that's
And look, I may understand that some animals may need to be euthanized if they're unhealthy or if they have an incurable disease or illness, but this is not what's happening here. To reiterate, it's because of surplus.
What? Okay.
She-
Somebody
okay,
that knows
some
what she's
people-
more about the ESCA, tell me. I
So-
mean, that's not the issue. There aren't that many surplus animals to begin with.
I'm not an expert on how the EAZ works, but I did get some context from how from people in the comment section of this video actually that kind of clarified how this situation worked and what was going on, and basically told her stop over dramatizing the situation. But how it works is that EAZA kind of views animals mating as a kind of a more of a natural thing, kind of enrichment sort of thing. So their stud books seem to be a little bit looser than AZA's in that regard. Obviously, they don't allow things like inbreeding, but if there's animals that have too much, we'll get to that when we get to that. I'll explain that. Just play the video.
Thousands of animals are being culled for seemingly no other reason than oopsie whoopsies.
That's
we have
not
too many
true.
giraffes that we don't know what to do with right now.
That's just straight up untrue.
Yep, here we go.
When revenue went down because of the pandemic, one zoo in northern Germany announced an emergency plan to even feed some animals to other animals, compressing the food chain like an accordion until the worst case scenario. Only Vitus, a polar bear, would be left standing.
Okay, and what's her problem with like they were losing all their money? They're not even in EAZA, and what did you expect them to do? I mean, it's just such bad logic. Like we all know that incident happened, and we all know that incident was horrible, but I don't get why you'd use that for this. I don't know.
For animal welfare and modern zoos being all about conservation then, right? When times are tight, the emergency plan becomes feed the animals to each other.
Yeah, that's in like one zoo in Germany.
She's making a blatant statement from one situation. Again, straw going on straw.
That was one unaccredited zoo in Germany. I mean, how much worse do you... Like, what is she even talking
Most
about?
of her examples,
Let's be real here for a minute.
Examples have been non-accredited zoos.
Yeah.
Zoos are
Or
a
zoos that
business,
have not had
and
these said
businesses put
animals
profits
for years.
over people and animals all the fucking time.
Okay, but Damien, I'm sure you know, like, nobody's making a ton of money. Nobody's getting rich off of this.
If I wanted
I knew that.
No.
I knew that.
In a
Nobody's
word,
getting
no.
That's why I hate this argument so much. It's like, I'm gonna go into zookeeping relatively soon, and it's like...
Zookeeping does not pay well.
And even the zoo director doesn't get any money. Hardly any at all.
Well, and from what I've learned too is like when they're doing like new updated enclosures, they are generally relying a lot on donors.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like almost every
Yeah, 'cause
exhibit
funded.
that you see has donors in the name because that's how they got the money to do
Exactly.
it. Nobody's getting rich off of an accredited zoo because all their money has to go into the animals.
I mean, I donated $300, and I'm gonna have a brick with my name on it on Predator Passage, where the lion around the lion and hyena viewing.
Oh, nice.
Like, so, yeah, it's just my name, you know, and then I forgot the little statement I did, and then it's a picture of a spotted hyena.
Oh, nice. That is fire.
So, yeah, I'll have to
And yes,
find
it
when-
does get
when that
even
opens.
worse than this horror story. Apparently, when zoos can't find homes for their animals, not only do they dispose of them, but just treat them like garbage too. One zoo in Denmark publicly dissected a lion in front of an audience, which, yes, included
That was an
children.
educational experience,
Another
though.
What?
That was an that the people in the Danish people that were in the comments section explained this situation. Like the animal had to be euthanized, and then they did it as a way to educate how the inner workings of this animal work.
I mean,
Better than
yeah.
putting this animal to waste.
Like,
And also the reason why they euthanized them was because they had no other place to put them. They would otherwise be inbred in captivity, which would ruin their genetic line. Hence why they needed to be euthanized.
yeah.
Which again, it's partly because of how EZA's kind of a thing on how working how stud work works.
Correction, it's
AZA's
Isa.
stud work's more stringent.
No, but yes, you can see in the captions there. Guess what's gonna come up now?
Danish zoo killed a 2-year-old giraffe to reduce the risk
I
of
remember
inbreeding.
this.
They dissected him and then fed him to lions. It's not as if we don't know this either.
Didn't
Worldwide
waste the giraffes though.
Take a shot every time you hear this in a zoo-related video. I mean, like this, every single person repeats this. When was this? Like 2015. I remember when this happened. Everyone went crazy, but it's like Yeah, that's one Danish zoo, and they had valid reason for doing it. I know. Do any of you guys know that specific reasoning?
It was
in detail, other than
it was
just
again
the
it was
basic?
genetic. He was too overtly his genetics were too abundant. Unfortunately, that was I think the reason why.
Because wasn't he starting
they didn't
fights
waste
with the other males?
He was starting the fights with his father.
Yeah. No,
Who
I'm not
was the breeding
justifying him
bull.
being killed. I personally think that this incident could have been handled way better. I mean, just send him to another zoo. It's not. But I don't think this is
we're
a
not
standard that we should
past
just
criticism.
judge all zoos by.
It's
I mean,
not.
Yeah, exactly.
If you, I say this all the time because people like to assume that you don't want people protesting, which is not the case. If you believe that a zoo is doing something wrong, you have every right to call them out on it and say, hey, look, I don't like how this is. I remember I sent an email to an accredited aquarium one time, and I was like, look, I'm not a fan of how you're holding these kookaburras. And the woman got back to me, and she was like, I understand. And she explained, this isn't their whole area. There's another area behind this tree, and you can't really see it because of how it's laid out.
Yeah, I actually,
okay.
I actually did the same thing back in 2015 with the Omaha Zoo's big cat area. It was specifically the polar bear exhibit in that area of the zoo. Saying, this area of the zoo is just not adequate for the animals. And what I wasn't aware of at the time is that they already had planned within the next few months to demolish it. So.
Mm-hmm. They
should have absolutely been called out on that, and
they were called. Yeah, the Phoenix Zoo expanded their elephant yard. Granted, we are down to one cow, so I have my issues with that personally. But being as a singular elderly cow, but we also are getting better mountain lion and jaguar enclosures because people said something about it.
Yeah, there's a difference between activism and abolition. If you truly believe something is wrong, stand up against it. But if you're not going to dig any deeper into it and you're just going to assume the worst, then that's why that's why officials that's why AZA ignores you. If you can't just show up and then just threaten to find where the keepers live and kill them and be like, why won't they listen? It's like, I got an idea why.
Ran up and was like, guys, just standing in front of the entrance.
Yeah, I remember seeing a video on my Instagram feed with some World Animal Protection or something criticizing the Bronx Zoo's giraffe enclosure. I'm like, indoor giraffe enclosure, and I mean, honestly, that's fair. I mean, it definitely is a bit too small and could use expansion, but it's not they're calling for it to be expanded. They're showing as proof why that zoo needs to be closed down and all zoos need to be closed down.
They did that with the polar bears too.
Yep.
There's zoos that do this with zoos that have elephants, like the Dallas Zoo, which has one of the best elephant exhibits in the country.
I know they attacked the Kansas City Zoo a while ago even though they have one of the best elephant exhibits in the country. I mean, if any of you guys have been, you would know they have a very nice herd with lots of room. But they don't understand this stuff because they don't know anything about elephants. Anyways, we gotta.
I'm sure you guys already heard about the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo.
I was about to mention that.
That whole kerfuffle.
Yeah, the funny thing is Colorado's an anti-slap suit state, so that lawsuit's going to go nowhere.
Yeah, I forgot about slap suits. I remember watching a John Oliver special.
Yeah,
on
because
slap suits.
he was victim of one, and ironically, Blair has already threatened a few of those, but we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
Outrage has been sparked when this happens, and it always makes headlines. People have been justifiably horrified that zoos have effectively bred these animals only for them to be used for profit and then end up as meat.
Yeah.
The zoo's director where this giraffe was killed was even quoted as saying, "A giraffe is not a pet. It's not like a dog or cat that becomes part of the family. It's a wild animal." It's a very cold and callous statement when we're taught that these zoos are supposed to care about the animals they look after.
That they're not pets and wild animals earlier in this video. Come on.
At least be consistent. And that's the opposite of what the majority of zookeepers think anyways. The zookeepers that I know love their animals like pets.
We treat our animals better than we treat ourselves, if we're being totally honest.
Well, let's be honest. The way I've kind of seen how it works, because it's how it worked with wildlife rehabilitation, we didn't see the animals as pets. We saw them as essentially our coworkers.
Yeah, that's how it was for me too. Like we didn't really
Like, they're
see them.
not-
Like we never. Like it's weird because like we'd have like Goofy like if his name was like Jack, like we'd call him like Jackie, like as like a joke. But like that's as really as far as like the pet lifestyle we had. Like we never were like going in there and like rubbing cheeks and doing like they think like we go in there like our day is just cuddling animals.
Like you're just hopping into the Grevy zebra enclosure and giving the zebras a pat.
Yeah.
You think you know how well that would end.
Now,
I have
guys,
stories
from
of
now
keepers.
On, I have a task for all of you. Try and maintain in this mysterious conversation. Try and say Azza or Iazza or whatever.
No, I'm not having that. No.
I know.
It's not even that. It's like it's kind of it's weird because like there are different ways to pronounce things. There are different ways to pronounce things, and I'm not saying that.
The way she's doing it is not generally the way people do it, though.
It's not. It's just not correct.
Yeah, it's not.
Yes, the Iazza.
Of course.
Bred this giraffe, then killed him at 2 years old, and then fed him to big cats there. You bred lion meat.
Which would have been
Other
better than
zoos
throwing
even
him in the garbage.
Yeah, that's what I never understood. I mean,
I concur.
I've talked to a few people, and it's like, why don't accredited zoos feed the carcasses of their animals to the others? I mean, it would be a lot more cost effective, and it would go through a food. It would be more enriching for the animals, and it wouldn't harm any animals.
You mean, probably some concerns about disease transmission.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That's the biggest one for me. Disease transmission is a big one.
Take the young giraffe off their hands, by the way, to alleviate their concern, but the zoo chose not to listen. They just ignored it and said, I see you're willing to take this giraffe, but we're going to feed it to the animals anyway. The Copenhagen Zoo would rather pay a bit less money for their lion feed that week, I guess, because that was clearly the priority.
One thing they're very, very strict on is they usually don't interact with the private sector in the same way the AZA will do.
Right.
AZA is pretty stringent on that too, but that's how they learned how to breed things like tree monitors, is through the private sector, because they figured it out first.
Yeah, and
fun fact,
she's so mad about them using the body as lion food. Like, lions eat giraffes in the wild.
You make friends in weird places. Sometimes we're it's a weird thing where it's like, we can't talk to anybody outside the sector, and they're like, hey, this thing that you've been trying to do for like 30 years, we figured it out in like 5, and they're like, hey, buddy, you want to like talk?
That's how it was with tree monitors.
It's exactly how it was. There's a handful of animals where like zoos didn't know what they were doing, and then you have people in the private sector that are like, hey, you want help? And they're like, no. And then they're later like, hey, can we get that help? Like they finally realized that like
geckos too.
Oh, that's I could not remember what it was. Thank you. That's the one.
It's been a big one. Yeah, they people were breeding them in the private sector for years, and then zoos finally cracked and said, hey, how are you doing this? Because we're not doing a good job.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little kid when it's like, you want help? And the kid's like, no. And then the kid sees that you're doing it. And it's like, hey, can I have help? It's like, you kind of have to like show them that like, you're not trying to talk down to them. Just like, hey, here's like a couple pointers. Like, here's what you do.
Yeah.
That's how you learn things. That's how you
these
learn.
cases
That's how you
seem
talk to
far
other
and few
people.
between, like something that would only happen at the worst zoos on Earth, killing surplus animals is allowed by AZA policy.
No, it's not.
It's just not. It's just incorrect.
She's
the president
of the EAZA with the AZA when they're two separate entities.
Of the association told Emma Maris at the New York Times that these tactics are rarely employed, and yet the statements from zoos themselves argue against that.
I could get my own tangent about Dan Ash, but
sadly, and I find it really difficult to say that zoos are still worthwhile because they help endangered species. That still doesn't make it okay to kill the surplus animals so nonchalantly, does it? And maybe
because that's not what's going on.
That's not what's going on in America.
Because it's just explicitly not what's going on. I mean,
let's put it in a simple term. The only interactions that AZA and EAZA institutions have is when they're moving animals between institutions across the Atlantic.
And even that's kind of sparse.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, for example, margays are really common in European zoos. They are non-existent here in
Same
the
for
U.S.
oncillas.
We may never get them.
Yeah.
Oh, and the von Cirrus too. I'm glad to see that they've made it over to the
Only
US.
only a couple zoos have them.
Maybe here.
In the
I
US,
could be
where
more
they're very
forgiving if
common
these
in
zoos
Europe.
put their money
Europe.
where their mouth was and truly put all their support into helping animals. But that isn't even
They
the case
are.
either. AZA
Kind of,
facilities
I mean,
have reported spending about $231 million on conservation projects each year, whereas in 2008,
probably
for
almost doubled
example,
by now.
they spent almost $5 billion
That is doubled
on
by now.
operations and construction.
Okay, well, do you not
But that's
want them to?
just-
Do you not? I mean, yeah, of course they have to spend money on operations and construction because that's how you maintain a facility. I mean,
like
what
it's
did you
made-
expect them to
that's
do?
daily
Just shut down and spend all of their money on conservation?
It's maintenance. It's daily maintenance costs, feeding
Food.
the animals, paying the keepers. You know
Do you
what?
expect the
what
zookeepers
any
to just
change-
not eat?
I was gonna say, I need food, buddy. Sorry, I gotta eat food.
like even though keepers are not paid very well,
Mhm.
they're getting paid. Animals are getting fed. Enclosures are getting upkeep. Animal enclosures are getting updated, and most of that is through donor funds. Like,
Is there a
come on.
Is there okay? That's a good question. I think you guys would know. Dino Crispo asked, "Is there an accredited group or whatever for Japan and China in that area?"
Yeah, Japan has I thought Japan has JAZA, the Japanese Association.
Okay,
I
good,
thought they
good,
had
good.
their own.
Yeah,
that was kind of my question on Australia and New Zealand, because I know that they do a lot more with Europe than because they're Commonwealth of Britain.
Yeah.
So,
Quote, a 2018 analysis of the scientific papers produced by association members between 1993 and 2013 showed that just about 7% of them annually were classified as being about biodiversity conservation. In my opinion, which is based
doesn't
on
fall
facts and
into-
research on what
it
I've
doesn't
looked
always
at
fall
just
into
say, the
biodiversity
AZA
conservation.
doesn't give that much of a
Yeah.
shit about the zoos they accredit, and
where
A little
do
more.
we start?
One thing I want to add before we get off topic is, for one example that comes to mind is bongo antelope, which
the conservation of wildlife.
Well,
There are
the
credit
truth of the matter is that it's a lot more hush hush than what I can say and what I can tell people. But what I will say is that the bongo antelope program is not something you can just. To put it quite simply, zoos are taking populations of bongo antelope, breeding them in captivity. Their offspring go to a certain facility in the southern United States, which I will not name. It's off.
I know the facility you're talking about, but I'm not going to say it.
Right,
Yeah,
right. And then
I
when they
think I know what
go,
you're talking to.
when they go there, and then
Yeah.
their offspring will go to a reserve in Kenya, and then in turn will go to the wild.
yeah, that's exactly how this works.
But it's not as simple as like do it now. It's like I'd love to, but you can't. It's just not something that we can physically
It's
do.
very complicated. It is
It's like-
very-
It's
yeah.
not as simple. I think the problem with this sentiment of closing zoos is that the people are very impatient. The time will come when this will happen, and you will have animals that are no longer listed. Like, however you feel about China and their breeding of pandas are not listed as endangered anymore.
They're vulnerable.
Right. So it does work, and it takes time. And of course, China was churning these things out like there was no tomorrow, because there wasn't. These guys were going nuts. It's the only animal they truly, They could, again, I think we talked about this in the beginning, where they could have put the Chinese water deer. Yeah, tigers, like the Chinese water deer, even like
Here, David's deer.
I don't even know how many red pandas are in China anymore at this point. I think most of them are now just like in the
Nepal and India.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say like Tibet area.
Snub-nosed monkeys.
Right.
Snub-nosed monkeys too. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Siberian musk deer.
Oh, they're gonna say
Oh, yeah.
muskrat. I was like, there's muskrats over there? I didn't know that.
There actually are, I believe.
Really?
But they're
Also,
not.
Desmonds. Gotta love those guys on a completely different note.
Oh, those are insectivores.
Yeah.
They're Eulopatiflums.
Accreditation is supposed to put a golden stamp on zoos that participate in said conservation, but their standards are developed by members of the zoo community. So critics say it's more of a, quote, assurance of non-awfulness than a mark of excellence.
And those,
in other words,
And those critics are stupid.
are very biased.
Really professional, Braden. Great job. That's a really
Very
professional way to
professional on
say
that
it.
one. They're very biased and very kind of narrow-minded in the way that they're thinking about this. Is a much more eloquent way to put this.
I want to preface this by saying that people who may watch this stream later on, and of course we do have a bias, but I want to make it perfectly clear that I don't dislike people who hate zoos. If you have a genuine concern, message me. You have an actual question, ask. You can learn so much by just asking questions. I don't hate activism. I hate when you tell keepers that you're going to follow them home and hurt them.
Yeah,
it's not activism. That is a crime.
The
Don't
core
do
thing
that.
about Illuminaughti's video that made me so mad. It's that she doesn't have actual valid concerns. She's just coughing up what animal rights organizations like PETA say, even though she claims to hate them. And that's the issue. She's not actually addressing valid concerns. And if she wanted to, she could speak to actual zookeepers and actual biologists, but that's not what she's doing.
Didn't.
Whatchamacallit,
the issue.
I don't know if you guys know the channel Daily Dose of Internet. They make viral.
I think I might be.
Anyway, he posted a video on Twitter talking about how he didn't like this enclosure at one of the zoos he visited, and all of his fans were like, "Yeah, ban zoos." But then what he did was he just emailed the zoo, and they explained everything, how it was a rescue raccoon, and it had these repetitive behaviors that it couldn't handle. So kudos to him for just being like, "Look, I don't know enough about this. Let me take a step back." And then a couple days later, he was like, "Hey, I got this letter. Everybody read it and calm the hell down."
He did a lot better. Yeah.
Go on. I'm sorry.
He did a lot better than what Blair would have done in that exact same situation.
She would have just posted.
He just subtweeted the zoo.
It's just
like
not
I said,
nearly as meaningful
it's
as you'd
just so
hope
much
for.
more complicated than bad, good, get rid of, keep.
Yeah,
it's just,
I think it would have been more effective
so
if
much
she
more
did a video
complicated.
just on the AZA, because she's just letting a bunch of unaccredited zoos slip into here, and that's kind of making me upset. But we got to get going because we haven't. Yeah.
And yet, this is one of the best standards we have. With this in mind, what other alternatives do we actually have? Can zoos be ethical at all, or
and they kind of are. That
it can be.
Is there another choice we just aren't seeing?
There's always room for improvement. Oh, can I make a comment about white tigers before we go on?
Please do.
Yes.
No accredited zoos have white tigers, and I don't know of any that do currently. You're more than welcome to correct me, but there are none, to my knowledge, that have white tigers because they are not part of the breeding program.
I think Woodland Park Zoo has a rescue. A few
Right.
Yeah, if they're going to have white tigers, they're going to be rescues. They are not part of the breeding program because of how they're bred there.
If you see a white tiger, there's a good chance it is not an accredited facility, and your best bet is to just
inbred.
Again, I tell this people all the time. If you're not sure, just look it on their website. They have every accredited zoo, even non-accredited zoos have conservation tabs. Just look before you go.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's not hard. Do it on your phone. It's not even like it's not like you have to be in front of a desktop. Just go on your phone and be like, say, I don't know, you're going to the Bronx. You're like, well, I don't know what the Bronx is working on. And you're like, you can see pictures of their worker of the volunteers and the people indigenous to Brazil or Guatemala. And you're like, holy crap, they are doing stuff neat. And then you can kind of be like, okay, my ticket would go towards a good cause. And then
Phoenix Zoo has placards discussing this. They have a whole placard in their spectacle bear area discussing research on things like giant anteaters, giant armadillos, all in situ conservation.
It is, we could be here all the doodah day explaining how complicated it is. But the truth of the matter is that if you have questions, don't just assume the worst. We're not monsters. You're more than welcome. We're not going to hurt. We don't bite, unlike you guys. No offense.
Yeah,
you guys tend to
anti-zoo peeps are kind of get a little confrontational.
That's just animal rights activism as a whole, and that's where I kind of have the issue with it. It's if you have a valid concern, go ahead and state that. I could go on a separate tangent about stuff like factory farming and that, but
right.
Oh, absolutely. That's the thing. I don't disagree with. If you are vegan, I don't disagree with you in the slightest. If you don't if you have a genuine concern, call it out. That's your right as not even as an American, just as a human being. Just if you don't like something, say something.
Exactly.
That's the issue. That's
and I just want to be again. I feel like
they don't just say it. They threaten people and they attack. But if you have a valid concern with something, I have nothing. I'm just gonna say this. I have nothing against. If you genuinely think something, speak your mind. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, and
But
again, there are limits to it. Like,
my problem with it
if
isn't
you
that they're
if you
speaking their
truly
mind,
believe
it's that they're
something,
wrong.
Yep.
And it's
Like-
harmful enough to spread misinformation to stop wildlife conservation.
yeah. Again, if you have a legitimate like, this is a completely off-topic thing, but like the whole like, you know, like the president is like a lizard person. Like that is not what we mean by speak your mind.
Yeah.
Like that's a conspiracy. Like we mean like if you have a genuine concern where you're just like, look, and even if at the end of the day you after listening to us and you think like, you know, I'm still not a fan, but the fact that you listened, yeah, the fact that you listened showed that you are more than willing to, you know, you are, I guess what's the word? You can conversate with someone that you might you would have considered your enemy. Like they make it seem like this, you know, bad, good, you know, like we're enemies type thing. But I don't hate anybody. Like I don't really care. Like if as long as you're not threatening to hurt me or my coworkers or my friends, I have no quarrel with you.
Yeah, it's so exactly. And generally when you talk to people, even if they don't agree with you immediately, you make them think.
Yeah.
No, and
that's the best
People
part.
don't
Just people think.
when it comes to this stuff, they act.
And
that's
here's the thing
issue.
that I've been talking about with a few people on the vegan extremist Twitter is like, I wholeheartedly agree that certain things do need to stop, but by being obnoxious and threatening people and attacking them and doing these weird protests like PETA does outside of SeaWorld, you're not convincing anyone. You're just making yourself look like a drama queen.
And
The first time I dealt with PETA, I was not in the zoo industry. I was not a member of AZA. I was 9. Let me put this into perspective. I was harassed at 9 years old by PETA. If they're going around harassing kids, that's all you need to know. Okay.
What was the god awful
happened?
crime that you got harassed?
I was so I was in Florida. I must have been in 5th grade. I was quite young. Anyway, I was taken to SeaWorld. Now, no matter how you feel about SeaWorld, I was not the one going. I was a child. I did not decide to go. So even now, I'm not a big fan of cetacean captivity, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I visited.
But pulling a kid aside, and being like, if pulling a kid aside and being like, hey, like, I can't remember. Truth be told, it was kind of like traumatizing, so I pushed a lot of it out of my brain. But a lot of it was just like, you know, like, hey kid, come here, and like, they were trying to like coerce me into, you know, agreeing with them. And then my mom was there. My mom was like, could you leave him alone? He's a kid. And then finally my dad was like, hey, cut it out. And then they finally, like, I don't know what it was, but they finally backed up when they realized it was like me and my whole family. It's weird because like my family took me to the zoo like every weekend. So like
that
it was just
scarily sounds like how cult recruitment works. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and the problem is that's
what it is.
That's why PETA. I called PETA out on it. I was like, hey, do you guys remember when I was 9 and you like, you know, told me I was an evil human being because I went to a place I didn't even know existed? That's my favorite thing as a kid. It's like, did you know you went here? It's like, I don't even know, like, all you know is like car and home. Like, it's kind of hard to like tell a kid, like, do you know where you went? It's like, I don't know. I got in a car, went to bed, I woke up, I was in a different place.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I remember when Blackfish first came out, that was a time that
I still don't forgive Netflix for
Weren't you
that.
like 5 at the time, Brayden?
No, I was.
What year did it come out?
It came out. What year did it come out?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, because I remember
It
I
was
had
much
already
more
been
recent
to
than that, because
SeaWorld
Illuminaughtii
at
did a
one
video
point
on
in
it.
time.
It's
I
like
had
I
already
was
been to
13.
SeaWorld on 2 trips already, so I don't know exactly. And then I felt remorseful for it
I've
until
seen how
learning that it
people
was
work
just
with
stupid.
dolphins. Like, it's much more nuanced, and you know, like again, back to the not making an animal do something. With dolphins, it's a 12-foot long, you know, nearly 800-pound animal. If it's not going to do something, it's not going to do something.
It came out in 2013, so yes, I was conscious, and I had already been to SeaWorld twice. So.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think. When I was harassed at SeaWorld, but we went to SeaWorld 2 days in a row because we went to SeaWorld and we went to go see one of the orca presentations, and I was like, and it was closed. And I remember my dad walking up to one of the tenants, being like, "Hey, why is it closed?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, one of the orcas is in like labor." So then my dad and my mom were just like, "Hey, you want to go like a second time to see the calf?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, of course I want to see the calf." I don't remember. I was around 2000, like 2009, 2010, because it was.
Oh, yeah,
I remember specifically because it was 5th grade, and I remember I like went to my teacher and I was like, "Hey, can I have like all my assignments for the next week so I can get them done?" Yeah, because I was like, so it was like September of like 2009, 2010 ish, and I'm sure somebody out there could look up the dates of what orca calves were born.
Paulo would know
it was
this.
SeaWorld, yeah, it was SeaWorld Orlando. So if that helps, but anyway, it's interesting. It's just interesting. No further questions. Carry on.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
The depressing truth about the situation is that
Can we
modern
pause?
zoos
You
may
see how it
not
says
be worth the
opinion? It's called opinion. It's everybody has a right to an opinion, but the problem is that when you can stretch the truth pretty easily if you're not careful.
People
moral
need to
cost.
understand you.
This is
can't
the
take
headline that Emma
opinion
Maris, an
pieces
environmental
at face
writer,
value.
presented in her New York Times article. And unless the standards around zoos and their conservation work drastically improves, I'm inclined to agree. While I know that we'd really, really, really like to think that modern zoos, with their focus on being humane and educating the public, have far surpassed old-timey and abusive zoos, we're just not nearly as far along as you might think. The first zoos were pretty much just metal bars and Spartan cages, and
well, yeah, but that's the first zoos. I don't see how that's developed.
Bro, that is literally a video from like 1960. Look at
it wasn't until
bro,
around
that's why it's on a
1907
Fox
that an
TV,
exotic
buddy.
animal importer changed the game by using rock walls and moats. ABC writes that during the 18th and 19th centuries, these royal collections of animals were called menageries and open to the public. They weren't even truly known as zoos yet, but when they did become zoos, they still weren't concerned with animal welfare, not bothering to learn about their biology, diets, or keeping the animals.
Yeah, and that's different now. So
In the beginning, absolutely, it was all just for profit. No, it was absolutely for profit in the beginning.
It was just hey, look at this animal. That's basically all it was at that point in time.
It was just a flex. It wasn't really. There was no bigger picture.
Yeah.
Was alive all
Which
that
makes
long
me sad
either.
that that was
it
the
wasn't
time
until
frame that
relatively
zoos had
recently,
thylacines,
and I'm
but,
talking the 1990s, that environmental enrichment even became a thing for the animals, like spreading seeds in the grass for primates to pick through. So let me ask you this. Does this make zoos better or worse than the 1800s? Back then, we didn't know much about animals and their habitats. Now, we've studied them far more extensively, and in many cases, we're still causing them stress, harm, or not meeting.
Most of what a lot of what we understand of certain species, such as clouded leopards, is due to zoos.
Polar bears
They're
as well.
so hard to study. Yeah, exactly. They're so hard to study in wild.
I remember when they started the polar bear program, they would bring they'd bring tracking collars to the polar bear exhibits to let them try it on and see how it worked before they go and put it on a wild polar bear.
Yeah. I mean,
like it was almost like a test run. So then they truly got as much information as they possibly could. So really, it's like a stepping stone.
Companies that do bear
mentioned. Look at the serval, everyone.
I see the serval.
Yeah.
Eating their meat.
Also, companies that do bear proofing test them out on zoo bears too.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say there's a zoo. I think it was Oakland, California, that did that one with the whatchamacallit, where they brought in a bunch of stuff for black bears to test out.
Because
a prettier natural environment make up for the abuse that so many animals face.
It isn't. I don't even know what to say.
These are all roadside views that they're showing at this
yes,
point. They're
a
not
naturalistic cage is most
never
certainly
seen a
nicer
monkey
looking than a
from
steel barred one.
like a
but let's
rabbit
be
feeder.
real,
Yeah.
it's still a cage.
White rabbits.
Saying you care about conservation is great,
White
but it's only
tigers are very popular for just attractions. They have no conservation. Right. There's no value to them. Let me rephrase that. They have a value, but not in the terms of they are not being bred for release. Animals like that with leucism that are bred, or not. It's not even leucism. It's just like a not a defect.
It's the similar gene that allows Caucasian people to have white skin.
Oh,
from my understanding.
Oh, okay.
That's how white tigers work. I think that's how white lions work too.
Only flowery words until organizations like the ASA start putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, ASA, put your money where your mouth is. God.
I'm literally a student of AZA, and I'm not a fan of Dan Ash. Just
Yeah,
straight up, not a
I
fan.
just
A lot
can't
of us
get
have-
over as
The problem is that he, to be quite blunt, he just sits on his butt while staff are being harassed.
yeah, Dan Ash isn't really
And he's
doing much.
trying to play the middle ground with people who literally want us dead. You understand? Like it's not even like a like, hey, we disagree, let's agree to disagree. It's like, dude, they're threatening to come to my house and shoot me. There's nothing to talk about. Condemn this and let's move on.
What he's doing is he's rewarding sociopathic behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
My favorite is when do you remember when 2018 they invited Dan Ash invited PETA to the AZA conference in New Orleans, and PETA immediately just went and set up a booth and started protesting. It's like, this is what you expect to happen.
I really don't want.
I remember that.
I really do want that to be improved. I mean, we can't just let animal rights activists have their way. I mean, this does sound like something out of Fun Jungle, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's much more complicated. Again, if the idea of if all zoos are bad, then all activists are bad. Do you see how dumb that sounds?
Yeah.
How activism is so important to the progression of like human society that if you just assume it's all bad, you're not going to get anywhere. Women's rights, for example, civil rights, you don't just say like, oh, they're just dumb and move on, because that's not how society progresses. If you think something's wrong, say something. Don't follow kids outside of a zoo and throw rocks at them.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
That ain't
with,
gonna work.
A lot of the stuff that animal rights activists do. Like, I agree with your core meaning, like stopping a lot of animal abuses, but the way you're going in like a cow suit outside of a grocery store and then like whatever, cutting yourself is not going to convince anyone to agree with you. It's just so stupid.
Nothing convinces people like screaming at them.
Yeah,
I've never been yelled at and be like,
people
this guy
like
makes a good
dressing
point.
up as a chicken and sitting in a cage on the sidewalk,
or just being naked, but like just being like just naked in public, like a crime, public nudity, and then just like wearing like fish scales and scaling themselves. It's like that. Okay, first off, you're naked. That's a crime. Second, that's not really going to change anyone's minds. I'm not a fan of factory farming. I was always like, but that's the thing. If you don't. Like, I would not know what I know without talking to people. It's not hard. Just talk to people. That's what politics should be with anything. Not even politics and like government. Just mean like two people disagree. If you disagree, just talk it out.
So I'm going to put my very quick 2 cents here. Braden knows this. My family, we got into contact with a local farm that works with Scottish Highland cattle. We still have a good portion of a half a cow in our freezer as a result. But buying local is important if you're going to be eating meat. And people that are, my issue with like PETA and a lot of these other very militant vegan groups is that they're kind of promoting the capitalization of veganism in a way.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of conveniently ignoring some of the big problems that come with things like monoculture.
Yeah.
Which is the deaths of animals that are involved in that through, pesticide use and all that other stuff.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
No, I think we can absolutely agree that I think we all can agree that factory farming should be abolished, but that's a separate video we could do. We're getting a bit off track.
That's a totally different thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's much
something
more.
I'm pretty passionate about. So
the thing is that there is common ground to be had. They always think it's like one side versus the other, but it's like my favorite thing is like when they're like all roadside zoos should be banned. You're like, sounds good to me, and they're like, what? And it's like, yeah, no, I'm in. Sounds good to me.
We're not.
And they're like, wait, and it's like we have
so
common ground.
When I say that I volunteer at a zoo, but I'm also a vegan, like.
Oh no, I've met plenty of zookeepers that are vegan.
Yeah. And they get mad and just claim that you're not a true vegan or something. It's the funniest
That's the
thing
problem
ever.
when it's like if you're not 100%, then you're like you're. It's like, again, I think what you were saying. It's like a cult thing where it's like if you're not 100% in. I keep cutting you off. I am sorry.
No, you're okay. But the modern veganism movement in that aspect, the PETA part of it, and I'm saying PETA as they are the most well-known representative of this sort of thing. It is essentially a quasi-religious cult at the end of the day.
Yeah,
and they don't allow
the
anything.
exact same way as many of I'm not going to go as far as to say, oh, they're just like like what happened with the compound around Waco, if y'all remember, anybody remembers that. But but they've got some of those warning signs that are very obvious if you know what you're looking at, and the big one is it isn't us versus them. That is the big red flag there.
And the thing that a lot of animal rights activists are doing is they're just jumping so quick at everything. It's like you're never going to succeed by trying to I got in an argument with someone on Twitter that admitted to stealing animals from local farmers and liberating them.
Oh God, yeah, I saw that.
Sending them to their deaths.
That's not the goal.
The same person, by the way, also took her 2-year-old and 4-year-old to protest with her outside SeaWorld.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfect definition of.
A lot of these people also think that keeping pets like dogs and cats is slavery. Let's not forget that.
Yeah,
okay,
I want to make it perfectly clear that
it's
equating.
Midnight. It's midnight here. I don't want to.
Okay, let's keep going on this video.
I think that in some ways we're actually worse off now than we were in the 1800s because it's harder to condemn people that, at least outwardly, seem to care about their animals. The average person may see the ASA's promises about research, humane treatment, and reintroduction and not bat an eye, whereas they're not really seeing the full picture in the first place. The Guardian has reported that zoos in Australia have been reinvented and gone from cage to conservation too, but the actual core purpose of zoos hasn't really changed much. While there are a few that do have a positive impact, they remain very few and far between. In order to make money, zoos' priorities often remains with this: entertainment, not the animals. So let me reiterate,
which is
not
true.
Every single zoo is this way. There are zoos out there that are renowned for conservation efforts. However, it can be very difficult to sort the good from the bad. After all, the word conservation itself has become something of a buzzword, and unless you're looking at their budget, their rehabilitation, and things of that nature, it's really hard to know how helpful a zoo actually is. WAP argues that even the most progressive zoos out there, as helpful as they claim to be, only keep about 3.5% of the total number of animal species listed
citation needed
by the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. In other words, even the best of zoos are only helping a teeny tiny fraction of the animals that actually
many of those
it.
species are also difficult to keep in captivity for various reasons too.
Yeah, and
we've tried this.
It's much more complicated than it's being made out to be.
So much damage that, in my opinion, zoos just won't be able to keep up, especially when so many of them care more about entertainment and exploitation than conservation efforts. Yes, some zoos do help, but is it enough to actually make a dent?
Yes, it is, and we keep seeing it over and over again, Illuminaughtii. This isn't something I'm questioning. It literally just...
Keep going.
Personally, I don't think so. And if we're looking at raw numbers and data here, zoos in general seem to do more harm than help in the long run.
It's another opinion.
But how do we enjoy wild animals then? What's the right way to educate? Obviously, the answer is subjective, but WAP does have some thoughts on it. One of their articles suggests true sanctuaries, like the ecotarium example I talked about earlier. Genuine animal sanctuaries only take in animals that can't safely be returned to the wild, and they don't exhibit their animals. No, you won't be feeding them, and you won't have direct contact with the animals, nor do they breed them unless it's for a legitimate reintroduction program.
You need to do your research there.
Yeah.
Far better way of keeping wildlife,
this woman
wild.
is against preservation of the natural world because she feels like the zoological parks are somehow cruel, even though she uses examples like roadside zoos in third world countries. Basically, she is value morality above objectivity.
She was not being objective about this. She made basically a very nihilistic take of, oh, they're not doing enough for conservation, so we should just give up. That was what her takeaway was.
And I like this, nothing more.
Yeah, that's nihilism. Let's continue. We're almost done with this.
Aren't participating in the wildlife trade and the...
Why does she show a picture from fur farming?
I was gonna say, that's just like the fur trade, was it not? Like mink farming?
Was that a mink? Wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, it was a mink. Yeah, I believe so.
It was either a mink or a ferret.
I was gonna say, I don't know my mustelids, but I'm pretty sure that was because they also fatten them up to get more fur.
It was a mink.
Yeah.
The way that zoos are, and lions and bears at the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Colorado here, they have over 10,000 acres of rocks, grasses, and canyons to enjoy. Plus, if you don't live in a concrete jungle, it's not all that difficult to enjoy wildlife by just, going.
Not everyone.
My thing is that half of the animals I've worked with, these people have never even heard of. You show them a picture of a muntjac and they'd be like, "Oh, that's just like Photoshop," and be like, "No, it's real."
Yeah,
you just don't know what it is because the only deer you know are like
at the zoo to point at the lion and call it a tiger. I mean,
calling painted dogs hyenas.
Yeah, anyways, we gotta
continue.
Out into the wild, planting a little garden, putting up a bird feeder, join a bird watching or naturalist club. I understand that zoos probably look like a great way for kids to learn about wild animals, but in so many cases, the message can
it's a fantastic place. Especially if you're especially if you're a group of if you're a minority group that doesn't have can't afford to go to Africa. You can't just that's not something most people can afford, lady. That's just
and also right now Africa is being defaunated. The Congo Basin, the Miombo woodlands, all of these biomes, environments is being destroyed by a massive overpopulation of human beings.
Yeah, it's like where do
story here in the US.
Oh, their habitat is gone. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Instead of education when the zoos themselves feel that way. You can volunteer at a rehabilitation center. Check out a sanctuary, and a real one, not a roadside zoo that says they're a sanctuary. And please, unlike these zoos, put your money where your mouth is. If you really want to educate and help wild animals, go to the places
that have a whole African water buffalo. Where on earth would they get a whole African water buffalo?
Yeah. Every facility that I understand that has Cape buffalo in the U.S. are AZA accredited, including White Oak, which is not technically a zoo.
Actually care about the wildlife. But with all of that being said, that is
okay. Now more promotion.
Okay, we're done with this video.
Anyways, the video is over for now. Share your final thoughts, everyone. Everyone, just go in turn and share your final thoughts.
All right. Which one of you guys wants to start?
Can I go?
You start?
Yeah, go ahead.
You're the first on the Discord.
You're the one who knows more about this.
I'm gonna say, I say this a lot to people. You hate what you can't even begin to comprehend. It is so much more complicated than Illuminati has put here. It's just such. It's like looking at a pebble next to a boulder. You're only looking at the pebble and you're not seeing the bigger picture, or like looking through like a tiny window out to I can't even begin to describe the complexity of the profession and the work that goes into it. We could be here all night talking about just one species. So all I ask of people is to just take a step back, try to listen to another opinion, ask people, just talk to people that you might consider that you would you might consider bad. Just it doesn't hurt to ask questions. That's all I will say on the matter.
Yeah.
All right.
All I would say is that this woman does not know what she's talking about, and people like her are responsible for her apathy, which leads to the continued degradation of the natural world, which will lead to our own demise.
Exactly.
Right.
I couldn't have put it any better.
All right, and then to just piggyback off that too, because seeing as I have been in the wildlife rehabilitation side of things, where I've seen what happens and the direct impact that we have on our world, be it from animals getting smuggled out from the petri. We had a fringe-toed lizard as an education animal that was animal that was smuggled from Mexico, even though it was a native species to Arizona. She is very much taking a very nuanced topic, a topic that's a whole lot of gray, not a lot of black and white, and then just makes this very black and white nihilistic view on it. And that's my biggest issues, because she's not educating anybody. She's just promoting apathy to this situation, which, is not something we should be having right now when we're in the middle of a mass extinction.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it's like, my final thing that I'm going to say is that yes, in a perfect world, zoos and aquariums wouldn't exist, but unfortunately we're not in a perfect world where that's the case. Because, as you said, there's literally a mass extinction going on. I mean, we don't really have much of an alternative, and zoos are the best way to do that. So I encourage everyone watching this live stream to go to your closest accredited zoo, volunteer there, work there, do whatever you can.
Volunteer with
support those conservation
local wildlife
efforts.
rehabilitation facilities too.
Yeah. And I hope that I've helped clear up we've all helped clear up some misnomers within this stream. So yeah, that's about that.
And-
I mean, it's getting pretty late.
And a quick
Any final thoughts?
and a quick warning. Anyways, and a quick warning to any potential Blair stands that might be stalking this thing and start commenting in bad faith, because I know you've been doing that to anybody who criticizes her now, not just people demanding accountability from her for her actions. I know who you are. I've run into you more than once. Don't try that here. You're going to get a kind of a blunt reception, not a harsh one, but definitely a blunt reception from me, at least. That's all I had to say.
Simon, anything you want to add, boss?
That video was pretty cringe. I mean, honestly, I'm like half asleep at this point, but I mean, who wouldn't be after watching that?
Me too, though.
Lord. Yep.
That's about does it, right?
Right.
That's about does it for this video, yeah. Yeah, we're not even going to touch the SeaWorld one, because that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah,
we
and
could do
for
that
most
if
of you
this
guys,
video
it is
does well.
now the next day.
But
so.
honestly, I really don't want to fight the horde of SeaWorld haters, because they are the most terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the toxic animal rights kind of just condensed and epitomized. So we're not going to touch that subject.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep.
Okay, so we can all agree that was pretty cringe, and that
surface level.
But to anyone that does believe that, I hope that I've changed their perspective a little bit on it, because the entire goal of this video is to just debunk the sheer amount of misinformation and try and get people to understand that her generalization of zoos just doesn't really work. I don't know what to say. Like, yeah. So with that aside, I'm gonna end the live stream now. But I thank you all very much for watching, and I thank you all very much for being here. I'll end the stream, and then maybe we can talk a little bit afterwards.
All right.
Okay.
That's not a problem.